All right, so welcome to the video. In this video, I'm going to share with you an exercise I recommend you do if you feel lost in life. And that exercise is called the funeral test. Now, just a brief introduction to this video and this concept as a whole. The reason why I'm making this video is because about a week or so ago, I reached out to my newsletter about their progress on their goals. And for anyone watching this that's not familiar with my newsletter, I have a newsletter. It's a little bit over 300 people. It's been growing pretty consistently lately. You can get free access to it if you download any of my free courses or programs or guides, anything pretty much. And what I try to do in the newsletter is give value, but I give a mix of personal insights to help people achieve their goals. I give kind of research to help people achieve their goals, kind of research-backed articles or research-backed suggestions to help people achieve their goals. And what I also try to do is I try to reach out and I try to kind of give my 2 cents to people in a one-on-one fashion to help people achieve their goals. And that's their goals in health, wealth, and relationships as a whole. But ultimately, I think that in order for you to achieve those 3 pillars, as I call them, you need time management to do that. So essentially what I do is in the newsletter, I try to help people with time management. So I reached out about a week or so ago, and I was curious to know where people were in their goals. At the time of recording this video, it's July, the end of July. The year is almost finished. We're about over halfway through the year. And I was curious to know, did people actually get done what they wanted to accomplish? And I was actually kind of taken back. I found that most of the people, an overwhelming amount of people that actually responded to my email did nothing so far, despite it being past the middle of the year. A lot of people responded and they said, well, I don't even have a goal set up. I didn't really get much done. I feel like I haven't really achieved that much. And it always came back to them not having a goal. And I found that if you don't have a vision for yourself, if you don't have a goal for yourself, by default, you're going to kind of be in this position where you feel hopeless and lost in life. And that's what we want to avoid. I think that's one of the biggest ways to kind of just waste your life and waste your time in the grand scheme of things. And so I kind of did a live the other day and I was talking about if you don't have a vision, if you don't have goals, the funeral test, this thought experiment that I'm going to share with you soon, is, in my personal experience, a good way to get some goals and a good way to kind of kick yourself in the ass, so to speak, and get stuff done. It gives you a new sense of motivation. So I want to share that with you in this video. And for the record, I'm going to share with you kind of the thought experiment itself and my take on it based on my personal perspective and what I've done in my life to basically achieve many of the things I've wanted to achieve. And I'm still using this every single day to achieve more things in life. The reason why I say this is because I found that a lot of YouTubers and a lot of people online, what they do is they do research and they read books and they give you the things that they read or the things that they did research on. And that's fine. I think that's totally fantastic. But the problem with that, in my personal opinion, is it's kind of like base level information. If you read a book about something, like say, for example, you read a fitness book about something, how to do a certain workout, that's cool. It'll let you do the workout. But it's a difference between reading a book, reading one book and learning something versus spending 10 years trying to actually do something, maybe from a starting point of what you read in the book, but actually applying it for 10 years. And then maybe you have your own perspective. Like the book said A, B, and C. A is true. B and C aren't as true. I found that D, E, and F work significantly better, but no book's going to say that because maybe it's risky or maybe it's just not common sense. Doesn't matter. The reason doesn't matter. But this is why I want to give my 2 cents on this because I don't want to just give you what was in a book. I want to give you my personal perspective on it based on what I've accomplished and what I've done in my life. I think that's a better, more higher quality way of presenting information. So real quick, before I kind of get into the funeral test and before I kind of get into my thoughts on what you can do to achieve this and achieve your goals, I want to kind of do a shameless plug. If you are struggling to achieve your goals this year, or in general, if you've been struggling to achieve your goals, if you have things that you kind of want to do, but you haven't been able to get them done, I highly recommend checking out my Productivity Accelerator Masterclass. It's about 30 minutes. You can 1.5x speed it. You can 2x speed it if that's how you roll. But pretty much what I go over is my 3-step framework that guarantees every single day is successful. And it'll help you easily achieve any goal you have, whether it's financial, physical, or social, in less than 30 minutes. If you're interested, there's a link down below, depending on what platform you're watching this on. Wherever links can be found, there's a link that'll take you straight to the video. Like I said, it's 30 minutes, super straightforward. You don't need to purchase any more productivity books. You don't need to watch any more productivity videos. You don't need to buy my coaching. You don't need anything if you watch this 30-minute video and actually apply what I tell you into your life. I guarantee you don't have to pay for anything ever again if you apply the lessons I share with you in the Productivity Accelerator masterclass into your life. Does that make sense? So now to kind of get back into it, why should you even listen to me? Now, before I tell you about the funeral test and before I tell you about how effective it can be for you and the exact strategy to maneuver through the funeral test, I want to give you context about first how I stumbled upon this concept and how it's helped me. So years ago, I used to have very bad depression. And for the record, I want to bring this up. I want to be transparent about this. When I say I went through bad depression, this is me, my personal perspective of depression. This is how I perceive it. I perceive it to be bad. Now, I'm sure there are some people that'll say my depression is way worse, and it probably has been. This is not like me trying to one-up some people on the depression, level. It's not my concern. And I was never clinically diagnosed. I never went to a doctor or a therapist or anyone else and got diagnosed with depression. When I say that I had bad depression, pretty much I had immense sadness, and there was this immense pressure that I had in my life, and it prevented me from doing the things I wanted to do. And over the years, and this is kind of a side tangent, over the years, I've kind of reverse engineered why I think I had depression and what steps to take to defeat depression. And I think I've successfully done that. If you know me in real life, I'm the least depressed guy out there. I'm one of the most optimistic people nowadays. But at the time, I wasn't that way. The funeral test certainly helped me get to the point that I am now. So how did I learn the funeral test, and how did I apply this to my life? So I'm going to share with you two separate occasions I've used this test to help my life. And for the record, I say it's a test, but really it's a thought experiment. And once you kind of go through the thought experiment, which is super simple to do, it doesn't require much time. Like I said, it'll create a new sense of urgency. And I think that sense of urgency is what's going to really make a big difference. So the first time I kind of stumbled upon this idea, this concept, I was working at a gas station. I just got kicked out of college. I received a letter in the mail. It very politely said, do not come back to college. You still owe money for your tuition. Don't come back until you pay that off. And so I had to get an apartment. It sucked because I didn't feel prepared to be in the real world, so to speak. Like up until this point, I was kind of I say happily, there was still a little bit of depression, but I'm saying happily in the sense of being bliss or being ignorant. I'll put it that way. I was ignorant to the fact that in the real world, you have bills. In the real world, you have to budget. In the real world, you don't make that much money, maybe because of taxes, because a lot of jobs are stingy. A lot of jobs don't just hire you right away. It sucks sometimes in the real world, especially if you're not prepared. And I just got kicked out of college. I went from being in a relatively comfortable position in hindsight to having to get a full-time job. Actually, at the time, I had to get multiple full-time jobs because I did not have money. It sucked. And I felt horrible about my situation, especially because a lot of the people I worked with, I put on here that I worked at a gas station. I did work at a gas station called Snappy's, but I also worked at Walmart full-time. I worked in the produce section and it's produce in another section. They told me to work in two sections because they gave me a little bit extra money, but I barely worked in the other section. But produce was the primary section I worked in. And I also worked at a movie theater at the time as well. And eventually I went from the movie theater to working at a bar as a dishwasher. But when you are in these situations, you kind of meet people who have worked in these jobs for decades. And you can tell it kind of fucks with their head. And they say things like, yeah, I've worked here forever. It sucks. This is shitty. They're so negative about their job, which I understand. I understand why they're negative. But their negativity starts to kind of permeate through your mind, if that makes sense. And it makes you negative, and it makes you believe that you're going to be in their position. Like me as a 23, 22, whatever year old, I thought that I'd be that 40-year-old, that 50-year-old, that 60-year-old, still working at Walmart or still working at the gas station, because it's hard for people to kind of see into the future. It's difficult for someone to sit there and like adequately see themselves in the future the way they want to be and like really reverse engineer their process. And by the way, the funeral test is going to show you exactly how to not do that. It's going to show you the effective way to reverse engineer your life. But I didn't have the funeral test at the time. And so my thought process was, this person started working here when they were 20 or 30, and they're still here when they're 40, 50, or 60. I'm going to be that exact same way. And that sucks because I make no money and life is super stressful being in this position. And so eventually, I was kind of unmotivated, still going through depression. The depression kind of ramped up because not only was I single, not only was I out of shape, not only was I broke, I'd also been kicked out of college, which was kind of that last piece of like joy or happiness, like momentary joy or momentary happiness that I had. And I kind of had to just go through this huge life transition. Had to find an apartment with no money, just sucked. Had to have like 4 roommates. It was awful. And so sort of one day I was kind of just going to the library more because I did want to improve myself, but I had no goals and I had no vision. And I remember, I think I wanted answers for myself. I wanted to know, like, how do I get myself out of this situation? And there was no one around me that could help. And I kind of thought to myself, well, where can I go to get answers to my problems? And the only thing I can come up with was the library. So eventually I kind of like forced myself to get to the library, which was not easy. When I say I forced myself, don't perceive it to be like an overnight thing. This was like months of me sitting there doing nothing, and piece by piece, like walking past the library, contemplating going in the library, maybe going in the library one day but not doing anything and then walking back out. Maybe one day going in the library and eventually getting my library card but not actually going upstairs to actually look at the books. It's a gradual process. This was not like a snap my fingers and one day I went in and started like reading books. It took a long time, which is why I'm sharing this, because I don't want you to go through that process that I went through. Eventually went to the library though, stumbled across some books, and one of the books was, I think I have it in the next slide. It was called Higher Status by Jason Capital. For anyone that's not familiar with Jason Capital, he was sort of a pickup artist slash dating coach slash productivity guru. I found his content to be very beneficial, but at the time I stumbled across this this book. I think it was actually an audiobook that I first stumbled upon, and tried to apply what he taught in the book to my life. And he was the first person that kind of came up with this concept called the funeral test. And so once I applied it, it really, like I said, it really created a sense of urgency. And it really motivated me to go to the gym. I started waking up at 5 a.m. I started getting into like pickup, which is just dating. It's just me trying to date more effectively with certain like tactics and skills. And it led to me feeling more confident. So that's kind of what led to me first learning about this concept called the funeral test. Now, the second time I heard about this concept, fast forward a couple of years, I'm working at a law firm. Life for the most part was good. It was boring, but it was good. And when I say good, I mean I'm not stressed. I'm working at the law firm. The job itself, I was managing the stress pretty well. I had good money. I was making about 60K, a little bit over 60K, because I was making a good income from the law firm, but I also did real estate on the side, and I would do like marketing stuff for people on the side too. There was no goal in me doing these things. I wasn't trying to save money. I wasn't trying to buy anything in particular. I was just doing stuff because it was kind of a habit at this point, but I still felt lost. And I mentioned this earlier, but if you don't have a direct goal, you can still be lost. Even if on the outside, people might have thought, oh, dude, you're so ambitious. You're doing like this. You're working at a law firm. You're doing real estate on the side. You're doing this like other side hustle. You're so ambitious. I didn't feel ambitious because I had no reason to do it. It was just something I felt like I needed to do. It was just a habit. It's kind of like just waking up in the morning and brushing your teeth. You just do it because you feel like, well, brushing your teeth obviously has health benefits, but you just do it. You're not really sitting there thinking that deeply about it. You just do it because it's something that you've been doing. I was in that same position. And because I was kind of just going through the motions, so to speak, in a way, it started to feel a bit depressing. And I sat there and I thought to myself, like, geez, could I do this for another like 40, 50, or 60 years? And the thought of that just really stressed me out. So eventually I ended up getting like a business coach. I was really trying to like work on my real estate because as time went on, I did get the business coach, and he suggested having goals. And he suggested if you really want to have goals, you have to know, why you're doing things. Started mapping out how to create goals for real estate. And I realized that the long-term strategy is I wanted to eventually leave the law firm so that way I had more time to myself. And I figured with more time, I can kind of live a better lifestyle, a more ideal lifestyle. And he shared with me, again, this concept called the funeral test. And hearing this concept again, once again, created urgency, lit a fire under my ass. And it eventually led to me leaving my job at the law firm, which, by the way, was terrifying, leaving my full-time job at the law firm. But in hindsight, that was also one of the best decisions I ever made. Nothing against the law firm, by the way. It was a fantastic job. Everyone there was fantastic. It just wasn't for me long-term. And so, yeah, once I started applying the funeral test, it really motivated me again. I'm starting to like shuffle my words. I'm getting mumble mouth over here. But I created a company called Affinity with a business partner. Affinity, by the way, was like a marketing agency that we had. We focused on Facebook ads. And around this time, I got back into the gym. I was going through the motions at the gym. I would still go, but I wasn't like gaining or losing weight. I was just showing up and lifting like the same weights all the time. I don't think I even had a workout routine. It wasn't, I was really just wasting time. But I created a new goal to get back into shape, get my abs back. Because I kind of had abs in college after doing the funeral test the first time. But as you can kind of see like the lighting's not perfect, but 6-pack abs. I got to about 8% body fat in this picture. And around this time, I wrote my second book, but my longest book, which is called 27 by 27. You can see the cover of it on the right-hand side over here. I bring this up because in hindsight, it doesn't feel like that much of an accomplishment to write a book. It just feels like something you can just do. At least for me, it feels like something you just do. Like, oh, you want to write a book? Sit down for a couple hours a day and write a book. And eventually you'll have a book. But I do realize that for a lot of people, it's not that simple. It's a lot of mental barriers and it's a lot of effort to sit down and do the work. But so this is why I bring this up, because for most people, writing even a small book is difficult. The original draft of 27 by 27 was about 400, 500-ish pages. And this is with like size 10 font. And then I actually like cut it back because I thought it was too long and I thought it was a bit repetitive. I condensed it to about 200-ish pages. I forget the exact amount of pages, but it's about 200. And if you read the book, you can find it online for free, like the PDF version of it, the ebook version of it. But if you read the book, the font's actually super small. And this is me not formatting it correctly, but the font's still like 10 size font. And despite that, it's still like 200 pages. So if it were like a normal size book, I think most books are like 12 size font, 14 size font, something around that. It'd probably be about 300 pages, maybe about 250 pages, just to kind of give context to how big the book is and how much I managed to get done after applying this concept. So what is the funeral test? You've been listening to me talk about kind of what I did in my life to improve my life with the funeral test. What exactly is the funeral test? And again, it's a thought experiment more than it is an actual test itself. And so this is the thought experiment. And right now, if you're listening to this, please grab a piece of paper, sit down, don't have anything on in the background, and just try this out. This is the actual thought experiment. So right now, just imagine you're at a funeral within a church. You walk in, you see people sitting in the aisles, crying, they're upset. You're at a funeral. You walk down the aisle and you hear the voices of people as you walk down the aisle. You hear them crying. You hear them telling stories about the person in the casket up front. And you decide as you reach the front of the altar to approach the casket and open it. And as you open it, you realize that you're the person in the casket and this is your funeral. This right here is the funeral test. What are people saying about you after you've passed away? And what are the stories they're telling about you? And I think there's a few ways to kind of look at this. You can take the perspective of the present and think like, if you were to die, and I know this sounds grim, but this is part of the experiment. If you were to die right here, right now, what have you accomplished? What will people say about you? For a lot of people, if I'm being brutally honest, there's nothing to say. If you were to die right here and right now, people would say, "Oh, Johnny's nice. Johnny was cool. Every once in a while, he made me laugh a little bit." That's about it. There's not really much to say. If that's okay with you, then that's fine. Continue to do what you're doing. If that's not okay with you, this is why you need to fast forward and think about your future version of yourself. Think about the version of yourself that's 80, 90, 100 that passes away. What are they saying about this version of yourself? Is this version of yourself super high achieving? Was he high status? Was he the kind of person that maybe drove nice cars, had a nice house, threw great parties? I've done this test, and this is kind of what this is the version of myself that I have constructed and that I try to strive for. And I think of myself like as someone who dies at the age of like 135, lived a super fulfilling life, was always in great shape. People say, "Oh man, Lenny died at the age of 135. He managed to outlive most people by not even like by a few years, by a lot of years." The dude had like a crazy mindset. He always lived up to whatever challenges or expectations were set for him. He had a fantastic social circle. He was always fun. He was always the life of the party. He always threw the best events. He always was super fashionable, always well groomed, always well dressed, always super nice. Never gave me a bad experience. Never made me feel like any real negative emotions. In general, was always a pleasure to be around. Oh, Lenny had this great podcast. He had this great show. He was so well connected. He helped me achieve A, B, and C with my career, was always thoughtful, was always willing to help me out. These are the things that I thought about myself when I did this funeral experiment. These are the things I wanted people to think about me if I were to pass away. And I realized that there's a gap between who I was at the time of me doing the funeral experiment versus the version of me that I wanted to become. But when you do this experiment, it lets you realize what's missing in your life. One of my long-term, you may have realized that in my version of my funeral test, just kind of a few things I listed off. One of them was to be like highly connected, to help people with their careers, help people with their lives. I realized that in order for me to do these things, I had to become a more social person. Because in order for you to be well connected, you have to some degree, be more social. You have to go out of your way to meet more people. And so this is what I do nowadays. I try to become a more social person. I always plan on like doing more events. There's a bunch of different things I plan on doing. And there's a bunch of things that I do. Meeting Virginia was a result of me. I mentioned Meeting Virginia, the podcast. That's a result of me doing this funeral test, this thought experiment. Because I figured that having a podcast where the sole purpose was to meet people in Virginia, hence the title, Meeting Virginia, my thought process was, if I have that kind of podcast, by default, assuming I'm actually trying to get people on the show, I'll be more connected to more people. And I'm leading with the giving hand. I'm giving them something rather than trying to get something from them. Because I wasn't super concerned about the views or anything like that. And I wasn't selling anything as part of the podcast. I was just trying to meet more people. And to me, that was a good excuse to meet people. Hey, I have a show. I'll highlight you in the show. I'll make you look really good. And these are really good people, so it's not difficult to make them look good. I'll make you look good. I'll create video content for you. I'll edit it and I'll publish it to my platforms. All you got to do is show up and be my friend, right? It's a good deal. At least I would say so. But this is just one example of me using this funeral experiment, this funeral test, reverse engineering how I wanted to be. And then in modern time, in real time today, trying to become that person. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, the whole purpose of this experiment is to put you in a future mindset. I already mentioned that most people, they're really bad at putting themselves in a future mindset. A lot of people aren't able to perceive how their lives will be in the future. They're stuck in the present. And I think this is like biological. I don't want to get super deep into the research about why humans are like this. But it's good to know that you probably aren't thinking about yourself far enough in the future. And this is a bad thing. You need to start thinking about your future and then thinking about the ideal version of yourself and then reverse engineering that process to become the person you'd like to be today. I know it's probably a confusing sentence, but hopefully that makes sense. And I think one of the biggest benefits to this funeral test is that it builds urgency because it places your death in front of you. I think a lot of people try to run away from the fact that they'll one day die. I do think that the idea of death can be scary, but I do think that keeping this reality that one day you will die does create a good sense of urgency, and it does motivate you. I think if you could live forever, that'd be one of the biggest curses of all time, because nothing would matter anymore. If you could live forever and never like age, never deteriorate, then what's the purpose of doing anything today? There is no purpose, because you can always do it tomorrow, because tomorrow will always exist. But if you don't know if tomorrow will exist, if you don't know if tomorrow will come, then everything you do today has more value, it has more meaning, has more significance. So this is sort of the funeral test in action. Now, I've mentioned this before, but I found that when I'm unmotivated or when I don't feel like doing things, it tends to be because I'm lacking in a vision or I just don't have goals for myself. So this is what I recommend. I'm not going to tell you how to create a goal for yourself, because I've done videos explaining kind of the perfect formula of a goal and how to create goals, the best way to achieve goals. If you want to check out those videos, you can. I just made a few of them a few weeks ago. So most recent videos, you can just check them out, and you'll learn that. But once you kind of create these goals for yourself, it helps to craft a vision for yourself. And there's a good, I think it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey. I believe that's a book. He says, begin with the end in mind. It's a very simple concept that a lot of people forget to apply to their lives. They don't begin with the end in mind. They just live their lives in the present. That's a massive mistake. What I suggest you do after kind of doing this funeral test, once you kind of have the ideal version of yourself, like in your mind, what I think you should do is find people, whether they're fictional or not, whether they're fictional or whether they're just real people, whether you know them or whether you don't. Take that person, find people who are most similar to the outcome that you want to achieve, and emulate what they do. If it means that, assuming it helps you get to your goals. Now, so I know that might have been confusing. So what I mean by this is how I did it in my life. In my mind, I mentioned a few things that I wanted to achieve before I died. Being in shape was one of them. Living a very long time, having a good social life, having a certain amount of money and influence. I took those categories and I tried to find people in fiction or in real life that closely resemble the version of myself that I wanted to become. So in fitness, Dwayne Johnson was a good example. I try to work out the way I once believed Dwayne Johnson worked out. I could have put Arnold Schwarzenegger on this list too. I just didn't for the sake of space. But Arnold Schwarzenegger is another person. I'll watch their videos. I'll watch the way they train. And to the best of my ability, I'll emulate what they've done. I'll emulate what they do to get to the physique that they, in Arnold's case, had, and Dwayne Johnson's case has. Within reason, of course. If they do steroids, I'm not interested in doing steroids, so I'm not going to do that. But the training is what I'm focused on. Wealth and social life. I try to mimic Eddie Mora. For anyone that's not familiar, Eddie Mora is this kind of character on the left over here. He's from this movie called Limitless. And premise of the movie, he takes this drug that makes him like super smart, super charismatic, super intelligent. And it leads to him becoming like super rich and relatively famous in a financial sphere. Which I think is super badass, and that's awesome to me. And I strive to achieve similar outcomes to Eddie Mora. And so I watch the movie and I try to emulate what he does. I try to emulate the way he talks, the way he goes out, things like that. Same with Hank Moody. If you've ever seen Californication, he's the main character of Californication. His thing is that he's really good with women and he has a great social life for the most part. I try to emulate what Hank Moody does. So that way, some of what he does can like rub off on me and I can kind of adopt it into my personality and then ultimately become similar to him. So hopefully this all makes sense. If it doesn't, leave me a comment, shoot me a DM, and I'll try my best to answer any specific questions. Join the newsletter as well. You'll get more insights about these things if you join my newsletter. And then once again, I just want to do the shameless plug. Again, if you're trying to accomplish goals this year, I highly recommend checking out my Productivity Accelerator Masterclass. It's only 30 minutes. It'll give you all of the information you need to achieve your goals this year and every year beyond. It's super simple. I make it very easy to follow. If you just have a piece of paper, pencil, pen, whatever, you can take notes and you can work today, if you watch it today, on winning this year on a high note. So check that out. But if you like the video, highly recommend you clicking the like button. It helps other people similar to you find this type of content. Again, leave a comment if you have any questions, or if you just like the video and you want to tell me, feel free to do that. I'll certainly be happy to hear your feedback. And then the final thing, if you like the video, please click the subscribe button. It helps me tremendously. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So every subscribe click will help. It'll go a long way. So hope you enjoyed the content. Hope to see you in the next video. Peace out. Bye.